to acknowledge the string quartet playing here, and please note that the first violin is Henry Guy. Again, thank you for joining us here this afternoon. We are here to celebrate the extraordinary life of Arthur Pontes. I first met Arthur in 1995 when I was first hired to teach IB history at the American School of The Hague. He took it upon himself to walk me through the Harvard Coop and to select books that would help my students prepare for the IB European History exam. As we engaged in conversation, Art quickly determined that I also needed to read many of those books, as my knowledge of modern European history was sorely lacking compared to his. 1995 was the first year in the history of the American School of The Hague that an IB exam was to be given. He was certain that the program, despite calls to the contrary from some of his colleagues, was the right fit for the school. The only exam that was to be given that year was SL History, the course I was teaching. Why Arthur convinced the administration to give a 24-year-old kid the responsibility to teach students the school's first IB exam, I will never quite understand. But Art made it his mission to guide me through my years as an IB teacher, and he encouraged me to become the history and English department head after my second year and to eventually go into administration. It wasn't just Arthur. I also had Joe Mary, Victor, and Eileen to support me in The Hague. We taught together for 5 wonderful, wonderful years. Even after my wife, Honoré, and I moved back to the United States and started a family, we kept in regular contact with Art and Joe Mary. And I heard that he ended up at a school in Hyannis that was offering a radical way of teaching the International Baccalaureate. Working in close collaboration with director Eric Heiser, Art helped promote a concept called IB for All. A concept, although unheard of in 2004, is widely accepted as best practice today. In 2005, I was the Dean of Students in Miami when I received a call from Art encouraging me to apply to Sturgis. As I understand it, Eric and Arthur created a job for me that did not exist. I was to serve as the co-IB coordinator with Arthur while teaching history in TOK. Art and I shared a windowless office at the top floor of what was then Sturgis from 2006 to 2011. He also encouraged me to become the first principal at West. And in 2013, he joined me at the new Sturgis West building as an English teacher. And every morning, he would greet me the same way. He'd say, "Pete, I don't care what the teachers are saying about you in the teacher's lounge. I think you're doing a great job." See, it's still funny. Every morning. As he watched my children grow, he also helped me become a better parent. When my 3 kids were not listening to my wife and me, we'd get Santa Claus on the phone to talk to our children about the importance of listening to our parents. Santa Claus, of course, was Arthur. I was so fortunate that I was learning the art of teaching, administration, and parenting from Arthur. In fact, I had a front row seat to a master of the craft. He taught me so many lessons on how to be a better educator. One day I was visiting Arthur and Joe Mary, their home in Hyannis, and I heard music coming from his basement study. And when I walked downstairs to find Arthur jamming out to, I think it was Britney Spears, I joked with him. I said, "Arthur, I didn't know you had such eclectic taste in music." And he looked at me puzzled and shared, "Well, of course I listen to what my students listen to. How else will I be able to connect with them?" There are so many lessons like this one that Art taught me over the years. Another example was that as department head in The Hague, I was always curious as to why Arthur never bought books for his students until after the school year began. When I asked him about it, he shared, "Well, I take a few weeks to get to know my students. Once I get to know them better, then I order the books they might enjoy." The idea of forcing the canon on students never made much sense to Arthur. But maybe the most profound lesson Art taught me was rooted in the simple sign that hung over his desk at The Hague. From Hippocrates, it read, "First, do no harm. Because Art lived his life following this principle, we are here gathered today to celebrate him. Because in our interactions with him, he made sure that no matter how stressful or busy life was in the corridors of Ash or Sturgis, Art made sure that in his interactions with students, staff, and families, that first, he did no harm. We are here to celebrate the remarkable life of Arthur Pontes. As we listen to family and friends here today, let us recognize the gifts Arthur gave to us. I know that I speak for all of us in this room when I say that I am a better teacher, a better administrator, a better parent, and a better friend because I knew Arthur Pontes. I would like to welcome to the stage Paul Marble, the Executive Director of the Sturgis Charter Public School.
If Arthur were here, he probably would have encouraged me not to speak after Pete. Good afternoon. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Joe Mary, for the privilege of speaking today. My name is Paul Marble. This is my 9th year as Executive Director of Sturgis, and I've known Arthur since 2004. And he's guided and inspired me since then. That year we both arrived at Sturgis. Arthur was our first IB coordinator and theory of knowledge teacher. Prior to his retirement in 2015, Arthur also taught English and history. And as Pete alluded to, Arthur was instrumental in shaping the culture at both of our campuses. Joe Mary recently stated to me that Arthur considered Sturgis to be the culmination of his career. So we are here today, as Pete mentioned, in celebration of Arthur, his life, and his life's work. Arthur liked questions, so you might say, well, what is my life's work? I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. Arthur liked foreshadowing. Arthur loved teaching and students love Arthur. Some of them are here today. Our seniors would choose him to deliver a graduation address every chance possible. His last address was to Sturgis West when he retired in 2015. And just before that, he addressed the Sturgis East class of 2012. The only person that you would rather not speak after more so than Pete would be Arthur, so I'm not going to quote Arthur or try to emulate Arthur. That's impossible. But I am going to quote 2 of his former students to you. Because every year, each senior at Sturgis, writes a graduation speech as their final assignment. And I want to read 2 quotes from the Sturgis East class of 2012 to you today. First, from Aaliyah. Mr. Pontes, thank you for literally treating me like royalty all year long and inspiring me to continue with my creative writing. He compared it to Hemingway, so that was kind of a confidence booster. From Connor, Mr. Pontes never gave up on me and is one of the wisest and most intelligent people I've ever been privileged to meet in my life. One night he called me at home, expressing concern for my sinking quiz grades and asking if I was feeling well. Never has anyone reached out so far during a time I felt so low. The amount of care Mr. Pontes has for each of his students is unmatched. I can relate to Pete, to Aaliyah, to Connor. Perhaps you can too. Arthur called me in 2005 to let me know a student had said good things about me. He called me last year when my wife was in the hospital because he was worried. And he called me days before he passed away to talk about family, life, and Sturgis. And he treated me like royalty that day. A few years ago, I was going through another challenging time. Arthur came to school and gave me a new copy of the Pocket Dhammapada and showed me the decades-old copy he carried with him each day, held together by duct tape. This was the last of tens of books Arthur gave to me over the years. Perhaps he has given you a book too. In verse 12 of the Dhammapada, entitled Yourself, there is a line that goes, your work is to discover your work, and then with all your heart to give yourself to it. As we celebrate Arthur today, I can't say for certain what he would have considered to be his life's work. It does seem plain to me that Pete, Aaliyah, Connor, and I all agree that Arthur, with all his heart, inspired a love of learning, encouraged you, reached out when you were low, and treated you like royalty. He was a consummate teacher, mentor, colleague, and human being. So, back to that foreshadowing. Perhaps I could call teaching Arthur's life's work then. Or perhaps it would simply be more honest to say that we are his life's work. And in our eyes, to borrow a word from Aaliyah, Arthur Pontes was royalty. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome to the stage Eric Heiser, former executive director of the Sturgis Charter Public School.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joe Mary, for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Big thanks for the introduction. Such a real joy to see so many friends here in the audience. In fact, many of you I hired. So, and you're still here, so good hiring. Used to say, try to hire great people and stay out of the way. So, I have the utmost gratitude for the privilege of knowing and working with Arthur Pontes, as over the years he became the thought leader and the soul of the school at Sturgis. It was 6 years before his arrival at Sturgis when I first met Arthur. I was actually a candidate for the high school principal position at the American School of the Hague. And my interview schedule had a personal meeting with Arthur. But most of my meetings were with groups of people, multiple participants. So I think, reflecting back, it wasn't actually that strange because Arthur had such an amazing ability to make it seem like a conversation, not a typical interview Q&A. Fast forward 6 years, I transitioned from Mystic Valley Charter School in the middle of the school year to become the executive director at Sturgis Charter. And we needed an IB coordinator with outstanding experience to implement what the board was describing as an IB for All program. I hired Arthur and Joe Mary, and we were also lucky to hire Chris Andre, the current director at the American School of Rabat, Morocco, to join us from Peabody High School as our principal. Paul Marble also came from Peabody High School that year. Before school started, our first year in 2004, Arthur, Chris Andre, and I were sitting around the table in my office wondering if we could really pull this off, this IB for all, in a funky little public school in a renovated furniture store with no admissions standards for students taking the IB. After a chaotic start of school, we found that we really had our hands full. Several years later, Arthur reflected the following. They say you should be careful what you ask for. A challenge it was. I recall thinking, this is impossible. We can't make everybody IB ready. Nonetheless, we began operating under the assumption that, of course, IB for all will work. We had to think positively, didn't we? Looking back now, it seems like it was all inevitable that the school would succeed. Arthur had a profound impact on his students and his colleagues, as Paul has described. I would say that he was a tad wordy at times, but we all always knew that he was speaking from the heart. Sometimes we would try to interpret or boil down Arthur's views into shorter, more memorable phrases. And I apologize for many of you because you've heard some of these before. Arthur encouraged the faculty to see what is and helped them realize what could be. Arthur would frequently say, we teach kids, not stuff, as a way of emphasizing that memorizing facts is not what's important, but developing student habits of mind. That's what's really important. Maybe as a way of partially rationalizing our adequate facilities, we remind people that buildings don't make schools, people make schools. And Arthur was at the heart of that. As Paul Marble said earlier, students were so taken with Arthur's impact on them that each year he was selected by the students to speak at graduation. But Arthur humbly stepped back every second year to give his colleagues the opportunity. One student said about Arthur, "Thank you for shaping Sturgis into something amazing. It makes me feel more excited to learn." From another student, "Sturgis means the world to me." Another student, "He's changed the lives of so many." And many students would say, "It's hard, it's worth it." Arthur later reflected to me, "I repeat what I once said to you 5 years ago. Thank you for making my last professional years so fulfilling. Thank you for including Joe, Mary, and me in the exciting, transformative, and meaningful experiment that has become Sturgis." But I say, Arthur, you made it exciting, transformative, and meaningful for all of us. We have all been so lucky to have known Arthur and Joe Mary Pontes. Thank you are words that can never express our gratitude for Arthur and Joe Mary's impact on us, our school, and students and families around the world. Arthur and Joe Mary, you are missed terribly, but certainly won't be forgotten. Thank you, and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'd like to welcome to the stage Gordon Harris, the Sturgis Board of Trustees President.
Good afternoon. My name is Gordon Harris. I am the board president for Sturgis Board of Trustees. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today on behalf of the board. Thank you to the Arthur's family very much. I'm very honored. Arthur has left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of many. His journey from a dedicated teacher at Sturgis to a respected board member is a testament to his unwavering commitment to education and his profound impact on our community. Arthur wasn't just an educator, he was a beacon of light and an inspiration for all of who had the privilege of knowing him. His classrooms were sanctuaries of learning, where curiosity was kindled, and each student was encouraged to explore their potential. I know for my daughter Zoe, having had Mr. Pontes, Arthur, as a teacher, was a transformative experience. She always spoke so highly of him as an educator and as a person. He had a unique ability to connect with his students, to understand their individual needs and aspirations, and to guide them with wisdom and compassion. In my personal interactions with Arthur, we often spoke Dutch together, and it was reminiscing, and always reminiscing about our shared experience living in the Netherlands. This was always such a Dutch treat for me, because not only was it incredibly rare to encounter another American who speaks Dutch, but also how well he spoke Dutch. These conversations transported me back to my days at the International School of Amsterdam, also an IB school for all, where I learned under my favorite teacher, Donald Morton. Like that cherished educator from my past, Arthur possessed a rare gift for inspiring and nurturing the minds of young learners. His passion for teaching and his dedication to his students were truly remarkable. As a board member, Arthur continued to champion the cause of education with the same fervor and commitment that defined his teaching career. His insights and experience as an educator brought invaluable perspectives to the board, and his decisions were always guided by a deep-seated belief in the potential of every student. His contributions have left an enduring legacy that will continue to shape the future of our school and our community. Arthur's passing is a profound loss. But his spirit lives on the countless lives he has touched. His legacy of one of kindness, dedication, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. He showed us what it means to be a true educator and a compassionate leader. We will forever be grateful for the positive impact he has made on our lives and for the inspiration he's provided to all of us. Let's honor Arthur by continuing to uphold his values, the values he cherished, and by striving to make a difference in the lives of others, just as he did. In our hearts, he will always be remembered as a teacher, a mentor, a colleague, a friend, a legend. Thank you.
Steve McDowell, a friend and former colleague.
I know.
I was first acquainted with Art decades ago. His younger brother Vic and his lovely wife Eileen were hired to go teach overseas in Egypt the same year my wife Meredith and I went. And so somewhere along the way, a conference in Europe or somewhere, I was introduced to his esteemed older brother, Arthur. Afterward, when Arthur was the IB director at The Hague, and I became the IB director in Cairo, we would run into each other at better conferences, the overseas IB coordinators conferences, in nice little places like Marbella, Spain, Montreux. So when I ended up at Sturgis, it was great to see a familiar face. And as colleagues, we developed pretty quickly, I think, a mutual respect and admiration for each other. More deserved on his part. And for a couple of years, it was a real treat because we even shared a classroom. First, over at the original school, then when West was developed, over there too. I could talk, as my colleagues have, about what a great teacher he was. You know that. But something else happened. In one of those first years, Art invited us over for dinner. To a dinner party, I think to welcome some new overseas teacher to Sturgis. Jo Mary put on one of her great meals, and we had a wonderful conversation, and we developed this weird habit. We started to double date. Over the years, gosh, it must be over a decade, my wife Meredith and I were welcome hosts to Art and Jo Mary, and we'd go back and forth to each other's houses and try to outdo each other for dinner. We'd go out to restaurants at times, and the food was always great, and the conversations were always a lot better. And as we aged, and all finally retired, dinners turned to lunches, so we didn't have to stay up so late. But it didn't stop the conversations. In fact, my wife reminded me the other night that one time we went over to their house for lunch. We went over there before noon, and we didn't get home, back to our home, until 6 o'clock that evening. But what do you expect when together the four of us had over 3 centuries of stories, adventures, opinions, and occasionally some wit and wisdom. And this is the Arthur that I remember best and that I will miss most. Telling stories, helping out Jo Mary in the kitchen. Not everyone saw such a great partnership and deep connection the two of them had. In recent years, our meetings with them became less frequent. It sometimes seems our visits were spent more often around a hospital bed than a dinner table. In those times when when Jo Mary was laid up, Art was by her side all the time. And the same thing happened when Art had to go into the hospital. So the last time we saw them in the hospital, when he told us about the fatal diagnosis, and he just wanted to get home, he whispered to me, "I don't want to die in a damn hospital." But I felt so helpless. What can you do? Arthur was the best read man I'd ever met. He read all the time. He learned all the time. Even in that last hospital room, he had books surrounding him. So any wisdom that words alone could give, he already knew. He had already read many times. And I found out in the coming weeks that any solace that love could provide was there for him as well. With Jo Mary, her devoted family, his devoted family, very supportive all the time. but I wanted to give him something. So I wrote him a poem. And as his condition worsened, I was worried that I wouldn't finish my little gift in time. Because the last time I saw him at his house, he was too weak, too much in pain to really interact with us and had to go back to the bedroom. So I finally finished it, and about a week before Christmas, I dropped off my little gift, giving it to the hospice worker at the door. I didn't go in. And not knowing if he'd get a chance to see it. But a couple of days later, he phoned me. He said his family had been over that morning. He was having a pretty good day. And he told me he read the poem and how much it meant to him. I won't share the details of that last conversation, but it was my last conversation with him. But when he told me it meant a lot to him, I told him he meant a lot more to me. So this is Arthur's poem. But Joe Mary asked me to share it with all of you today. And like Arthur, I generally do what Joe Mary tells me. He says I'm fine. The poem is simply called Trees. The boy loved trees, climbing with his eye to sky, cooling under the shade of the elms, savoring their ripe fruit, tart cherry, crisp Macintosh, syrupy peach. He loved them all, the cypress of Mediterranean breezes, the laurel of fabled victors, the desert-loving date palm of Mary and Joseph, the falling blossoms of the jacarandas in June. As he grew, his love grew. He studied and learned to nurture the young trees, to tend the orchards, to rejoice in the fruit, and pause from time to time. He walked tall within forests of pine and oak, toiled by clusters of hawthorn and birch and willow, ever enthralled by the strength and beauty and the fragility of a world of trees. As he aged, he knew that the rings within held his spirit, the past and the present. So at his end, atop a hill surrounded by the generations of olive trees, he becomes the revered one, gnarled and windswept, still warmed by the sun, bearing fruit to the last, giving sustenance and life to us all.
We are now going to hear Hayden Divertimento for viola and piano first movement, played by Kira Pontes, granddaughter, and Abriel Ferreira, niece. Kira and Abriel, their way of communicating their tribute is through music. Art and Joe Mary encouraged both of them to follow their interests and talents. Art was a support of the arts in general. He even wrote an article for the ECAS periodical entitled Give the Arts Their Due in 1998. Please welcome Kira and Abriel.
grade, I think, was 1853. No, 1953. That's when I met Arthur. Shortly after that, I met Mary and Victor, his siblings, and his parents. Fortunately, I didn't get to know his father very long. But his mother played a big role in my life, mainly because I loved pie. In my family, pie was something you did for Easter dinner or Christmas dinner. An event big enough for pie to Olivia Ferreira was 4 boys in the living room playing a word game on the floor. She's like, oh, we need a pie. 4 boys. We were called into the kitchen. And through 5 years then, we became closer and closer, only at the end of that time to go in different directions. Still stayed in touch, but he was, I believe, first at Tufts and then Suffolk University. And I was off at UMass. We were in touch in summers and so forth. And then he and Joe Mary decided to go off and explore the world. And there was a gap, a large gap in our communication. Finally got together by phone at one point in the Netherlands. He was in the Netherlands. And my wife Sherry and I decided we would take a trip to the Netherlands and see them. And 6 weeks later, I got a call saying, you're too late, we're coming back. Which was good and bad. It was then, and we had both talked later about how the relationship seemed to take up exactly where it left off. We didn't have to start over. And I realized that it's just a friend. He was a special kind of friend. I call it a buddy. One meaning of the word buddy is a relationship that's built around an activity or an idea. And that takes up most of your acquaintance. And I've had fishing buddies in my time and tennis buddies, no tennis bunnies in this life. Arthur was my talking buddy. We talked, and we talked. We talked about the Red Sox. We talked about politicians. We talked about books. We talked about politicians. We talked about aging. We talked about aging politicians. And as time went on, fortunately, even though we were separated by 150 miles, the mails work and books go back and forth and the phone works and we get our talking done. And we kept it up as long as we could. The last several weeks, it was hard. It was devastating. But we still enjoyed talking. And I think at that point, when Joe Mary called that morning, I said, well, I don't think I have time to develop another talking buddy. So I'm just going to go on talking to Art.
Good afternoon. I apologize in advance for the quality of my voice. If nothing else, if I pass on in the middle of this presentation, it'll be quite cost efficient to hold 2 memorials, possibly 3 for my father as well, to get 3 generations of Pontsmen in one go. Yes. I look at this crowd of people who have traveled all across the country and this entire world to respect my grandfather's legacy. Most of you probably know him as Arthur, or father, or as a husband, or as Mr. Ponce, and maybe a couple Arturitos, if there's a few names. But I have only ever known this man by one name, and that is my Vuvu. This is the part where I would offer a perspective as his grandchild that I would imagine has some spice, some extreme differential quality than that you probably know him by, which is an egghead teacher who asks a lot of questions. But as a grandchild of Arthur Pontes, that indeed is an equivalent part of the situation. This man was the only teacher that I not only had after one grade, but for the entire 3 decades of my existence. And this is what I learned in Mr. Pontes' class. In order to converse with a man of his stature, and I knew early on the amount of weight that this man's reputation carried. As my first job doing maintenance in Sturgis Charter School over the summer, I once had an alumni encounter me in the hallways doing my job. I was washing the floors, vacuuming, and she asked, so you're Mr. Pontes' grandchild? And I said, yes. She gave me a big squishy hug. And I'm like, that's a lot of weight to know that I can't just fart around as a half-brained, half-formed, mush-mouthed teenager. I have to live up to the legacy of this great man, not just by other people's expectations, but by his expectations. And they were great. It's like weekend at my Grammy and Lulu's house, I knew was an incredible test. Because while this man offered the most unconditional love that I've personally ever received in my life, I also knew there was an ingredient of conditional love that I could play. It was a great game. The more questions I asked my grandfather, and the more questions that I answered from him, the less I would be asked perhaps interesting, challenging questions like, say, what do you think about abortion, Patrick? And I'm like, I'm 12 and eating a sandwich. Can I take a second here to develop as a person, let's say? This man abhorred ignorance. It was his comic book arch nemesis. I always interpreted him as, I tried to solve this great puzzle as to how a man with such virile distaste for the follies of mankind, and yet how he could have dedicated his life's practice to engaging with teenagers, which I don't necessarily know if any of you recall your intellect during your youth, but it was unlikely to be the apex of your personhood. It was very much the same for me as well. I knew that, this man sees potential in me for some reason. This is an interesting proposition. Let's inquire to this. What exactly about my personhood is this man so curious about? And this is where the unconditional part was. The man was simply curious about everything and about every person. It was a little difficult for me to reconcile just how much ease this man encountered every single social situation in his life, whether it be wrong numbers that he would just answer. Like he had never talked to this person in his life. He could hold full conversations. Every single nurse that waited on him during his time at the hospital, he got to know on a first names basis, like, oh, hey, how are the kids? And I'm like, how is this man so curious about everything and everyone? How am I supposed, what mechanism exactly did this man acquire to obtain this skill? I'm so envious of him. And it's a true, it's difficult to describe it as bitter, but I knew that, I'm interested in very particular things. Very a small select group of things that I've used to hone my relationships with incredibly passionate people who share similar interests. But this man had the ability to share mutual interests with anyone, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what race or class or background any individual had. He went out of his way to ask questions of them and saw potential in them. Carlson. The final days that I spent with my boo-boo, the vast majority of what we talked about was him asking me questions about my siblings and my cousins. When I was growing up, trying to live up to whatever, trying to find some essential element of his expectations of me, the man would not just ask me my opinions about random subjects. Yet, above all the people I knew in my life, he encouraged me to ask questions of what I thought about other people, about the people that I cared about most in my own life. And I discovered that was his energy source, was connection. Every question that he asked of me, and I assume all of you as well. This man was very much known for asking many questions. I imagine that whatever answer that you provided him was a part of a tremendous weight that he carried. He cared about every single thing I had to say without any reservation. He would retain answers that I had provided to questions decades ago in my life, and he would hold those constantly. Somewhere in back reaches of his mind, I knew an element of my personhood better than I ever did. And I have to assume, in order to honor him properly, that I was deserving of that sort of attention. That's the same kind of relationship that I imagine this man had with all of his students, the hundreds, if not thousands of people who've gone on to ask deeper and more thoughtful questions about their own lives and the other people in their lives, and to forge new connections and to allow those connections to help them carry whatever weight that all of us are holding. It's an incredible weight that I can no longer ask this great man any more questions. But I very much look forward to asking more questions of the other people in my life, because that's the best way I can to honor this great man's memory. I just want to wish his latest grandchildren, Kara and Jacob Pontes, a very happy birthday. He and I hold the exact same opinion of you two, in that we think that you hold more potential than any other people that we've ever seen in our lives. And we're very lucky to have known you. I look forward to asking you guys a lot more questions.
Thank you.
Always enjoy Andy music. It is important to highlight Gabriel and Kira here, just for a moment, as well as the string quartet, all friends of Kira. Gabriel arranged a song for this instrumentation. And just a note here, the guitarist Mila is a Sturgis student. Thank you.
as he affectionately called me, his blister, or his little blister. As the only female speaker today, I also represent gender equity. I think I've known Arthur. No, I know. I've known Arthur longer than anybody in this room. making me the singular expert on all things Arthur. In many ways, Arthur was a typical brother. He teased me relentlessly, and it's all true. He called me horse-face because I was skinny. As I got older, he reassured me that pear-shaped bodies would be back in fashion. I shouldn't be self-conscious. When I was about 13 or 14, I started receiving cards in the mail. They're the flirtatious type. They were signed the Pink Fink. I was sure it was Arthur. He denied everything and would look at me with those doggy innocent eyes, which I'm sure you all have seen, and say it's got to be from a secret admirer near it. I received a card either every week or every other week for 4 months. The Pink Fink indeed. Of course it was Arthur, and he thought this was hilarious. Because I was quite clumsy and not very ladylike in my mother's opinion, she sent me to charm school. There was such a thing as charm school. So when I had a date, Arthur would wait for me to walk down the hall and get towards the stairway, and then he'd pull the rug so I'd trip. He'd jump out with my certificate from charm school in hand and show it to my date.
No.
I guess they didn't teach her how to walk like a model. In many other ways, Arthur was not a typical big brother. Shortly after my father died, when I was 11 and Arthur was 16, I started going upstairs late at night and wake him up and tell him all the things that happened that day and talk about anything that bothered me. He always listened without judgment. Most amazingly, he never said, "Why are you waking me up and get out of here?" I was in 8th grade when Arthur started college. He went to Tufts University, about 2 miles from our house. He brought me over to the campus to have a look. We visited the Newman Center where art hung around. Between classes and all his friends congregated. I felt so grown up then. On Thursdays at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd take me to the small theater where the drama group performed one-act plays every week. I loved these plays. And when second semester came around, Arthur had classes on Thursday afternoons. So I would take the bus and go over to see these plays all by myself. What a big girl. Until I took the wrong bus home and my mother had to come rescue me. That was that. Arthur and a group of his friends planned a night at Mosley's on the Charles, a dance club where they had an under 21 night. And since it was my 15th birthday, Arthur invited me to go along with them. I was thrilled. I don't remember a lot about the evening, just that we danced a lot. My brother, Arthur Murray Pontes, was a very good dancer. When we came home, my mom asked, "Did you have a good time?" I told her I had a great time. But I came to realize that I really missed my father because there were, what appeared to me, to be a lot of fathers and daughters having a really good time. In reality, it turned out to be young girls with older men looking for a good time. He also took me to hear Dick Gregory, a comedian turned activist who spoke about politics and civil rights. It was time for me to get serious and increase my awareness of the world outside of Arlington. And it was the 60s, you know. My husband's reminded me that most brothers don't include their little sister in any kind of social events, let alone take them to college. I was lucky. My brother took me to a lot of places, and not begrudged, but never with Joe, my mother's favorite. Later in life, he encouraged me to go back to school for my MBA, and afterward invested in the business I started. Neither of us got rich as we had planned, but he was okay with that. Throughout my childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and current senility, he's always had time to listen to me, educate and counsel me, make me feel special in the spirit of fun. Lucky for all of us, his sense of humor evolved from the pink thing. I will miss you, my big brother, and your little blister will love you forever. My brother and I would like to thank everyone who's here today. We really appreciate your attendance.
And Joe Mary and I would like to thank you especially for taking such good care of our brother for so many years so we could all enjoy his company.
We love you. Excuse me.
So as you might guess, I am Victor, author's favorite baby brother. There's so much I could say about my brother Art, but I'll try to keep this tribute short and sweet, a plan I know that Art would wholeheartedly endorse, especially the short part. I would like to talk to you today about changing roles, paying attention, and contemplating an extended metaphor about clouds. Arthur filled many roles over the years for many of us, but for me, he was much more than just my brother. Upon our father's untimely death when Art was only 16, as you heard, he became a father figure to me, his spoiled little 6-year-old brother. As you have also heard, he enjoyed teasing my sister as we grew up, and he would deny, as Pete mentioned, he would deny most, if not all, of the pranks that you heard today. However, I am the only one who really knows the truth. Nonetheless, he was kind enough to refrain from tormenting his little brother. He just waited for me to grow up to do that. Later, after embarking on our overseas teaching adventures in Ecuador and in the Netherlands, he seamlessly morphed into my close colleague and my mentor. While in the Netherlands, he took on the additional role of extra special uncle to our 2 young daughters, Abiel and Rosie. They were lucky enough to receive some of his special life training, as he called it, the summer they came here to the Cape to live with Art and Joe Mary. They lovingly accepted his guidance as much as he lovingly enjoyed giving it. Naturally, as we got older, like many of you, I would often tap Art's unique wisdom for personal and professional advice.
I remember once I had become quite frustrated and discouraged by a number of people I was working with who seemed not to see the error in their ways. He listened carefully, took a deep breath and said, Victor, it sounds like you're suffering from a case of HOPE, horribly overestimating people everywhere. If you simply lower your expectations and accept that people will often choose stupidity over reason, then you'll never be disappointed. In fact, he added with his iconic smirk, you should thank them for allowing you to practice your patience and compassion. I have to admit, his advice has helped me often. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said, the most precious gift is our attention. Art willingly gave his attention to each and every one of the thousands of students he taught over the years, as well as each of his colleagues, family members, and friends. Even as uncomfortable as he was in the hospital, he would take the time to introduce a caretaker or a staff member who might come into the room. And then he would proceed to tell me all about where they were from and everything about their life at the moment and even their children's lives. No matter who he spoke with or what their story, he could always find some common ground, some connection. You see, everyone in his mind was worthy and deserving of his attention. Every lesson he gave, every conversation he had, was an opportunity to sow the seeds of understanding, empathy, and compassion. I already miss my brother and our many thought-provoking conversations. And though I hate to admit it, I already miss his very bad jokes and his many groan-inducing puns. But I can take solace in knowing that Art's presence is with us. When asked what happens when we die, again, Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that when we look to the sky, we see a cloud that falls to earth, perhaps as rain or snow. But looking deeply, you can understand that it is still present. When you drink a cup of tea, if you look mindfully, you can see the cloud. And maybe the tea you drank this morning has become part of your tears. So when you cry, the cloud is present in those tears. But the tears you shed today will soon become the cloud again. And so it goes. The cloud's not gone and lost forever. You can recognize it in the rain, in the snow, or in your tears. You can even recognize it in your cup of tea. So though you don't see Art in his physical form anymore, if you look deeply, you will see him in his friends, and especially in his students, his sons, and his grandchildren.
Apologies to whoever's next speaking up here, but I'm going to try to do this as best I can without the mask. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for showing up. This is quite not only the showing in terms of number of people that leaves me breathless, but the depth of how people seem to have known him and are able to speak to their knowledge of him, and the deep personal connection they had means even more. And honestly, I've been choking up here the last hour, just hearing all the wonderful things that people have said. Now that said, everybody told really nice stories about him, and so I feel like I need to balance this out. Really, the main thing that I want to talk about is, and I'll get to it after my shenanigans, is the one greatest gift that he ended up giving me over my time. Knowing him not only as a son, but as a student of his. He was my principal. At times I was in his classrooms, and let me tell you, when I'd have my friends come over getting them through the door without him cross-examining them about what happened. This was not one of my favorite things, but as all of those things to me, he obviously had a very deep impact on me as a person and as a human being. And not all of it always great. So this is the one thing, I'm joking by the way, you haven't gotten to know me necessarily, but a lot of my father's sense of humor, unfortunately, is one of the things that he passed on to me. It's not the thing I'll be talking about that was his greatest gift to me. But I have a couple of my earliest memories. The first is very much like what I've heard from folks here in terms of, my earliest memory of him was driving home from church. And it wasn't enough that we went to church. He would ask, so what did you think of the sermon? What do you think was really meant by that? The kind of cross-examination that everybody is familiar with him started really young, right? and carried on throughout my life with him. But it did take a little while to get to know his sense of humor. So for those of you who are of a certain age, you may remember a year in which Bucky Dent crushed the hopes of Red Sox Nation. And that was the first year that I actually really started following the Red Sox. So following it, watching every game, getting all excited, seeing them collapse, and then lose on the last day of the season. Picture a Norman Rockwell-like back porch and a little kid out there sitting on the porch, just crying. And his father sits down next to him and puts his arm around him and says, Joseph, I know how devastating this can be. One of the things you need to understand as a Red Sox fan is that if your happiness is attached to them winning, they will never bring you happiness. You have to find joy in them having a close call or winning a home run, having the home run leader for the year or anything, but don't attach yourself to the winning part. He said, because they haven't won in my lifetime. They never won in my father's lifetime. And the truth is, they're never going to win. And they're never going to win in your lifetime, your kid's lifetime. And as a little kid, I didn't understand. I said, how can that be? You can't know that. And he goes, no, it is how the world works. And that actually stayed with me. It did help me with all the times that they went to lose and came close. And it was like a sign of God in the world, right? It was a sign that something mystical that was completely illogical could still be out there. And I wept like a child in 2004 when they actually won, because the mystery of life had just been removed. So as far as parenting goes, again, that left a little bit of a scar that lasted my whole life, but it was still all in good fun. And in the end, I love telling that story. As far as his other abilities as a father, let's just say he made great mashed bananas, when I was a kid, but definitely his the chef of the family, he was not, right? So my mother definitely handled that well. I think by the time he reached the end of his life, not only was he able to still mash bananas, but he could make a grilled cheese sandwich by then that was pretty good. But the biggest thing for me that I've heard over and over in how people have spoken of him is that belief in people and the belief that everybody was capable of achieving something. That whole I be everywhere, right, concept, that wasn't the case when I was growing up and going through school. When we went to Italy, one of the international school in Florence, it was a high school the entire high school was 50 students. So there was absolutely no way that they could run both IB and non-IB for that school. And that was the first place where he, as the principal, really experimented with having everybody go through that program. And that happened to be this was a special time for me, because in a school of 50 students, I had 7 classes, and I had my parents for 4 of them, and my father was the headmaster of the school. I was sent to his office a lot. The whole go to your father's office thing is still rings in my ears. But anyway, one of the things that that was interesting was I was in his classroom. I was in his history class, and I was in his English class, and I was seeing some people who weren't the brightest bulbs in there trying to do the IB. And what was astonishing was seeing how much they grew over the course of that year.
Art and I were married for more than 57 years. One of the ways that we stayed married was that he didn't speak for me and I didn't speak for him. Now, of course, we knew what the other person was thinking, and we could have answered for the other person, but we didn't. And of course, we didn't always agree anyway. But anyway, today, I'm going to speak for him. Unfortunately, without his eloquence and humor. He has 2 messages for you. The first one is to say thank you. This is from both of us, and we both agree. Now, Art and my sons have consistently chided me for giving too many examples when I speak. I could easily fall into this trap today. There are so many people to thank, so many things to thank them for, that I could go on forever. But I would end up, no matter how long I went on, I would miss someone and some acts of kindness. So I'm not going to try to specify anybody or any person. But we are thankful for all the thoughtful acts, the kind words, and the love extended to us and our families and I think that you've given to each other over the last difficult 5 months and over the years and the decades. This sustained him. It made his passing easier. Thank you. And the second message that I have for you from Art will be delivered by Mercedes Sosa. It is a song written by Violeta Parra. The song is in Spanish, and there are English and Spanish subtitles. Now, before we start this, I would like to mention, first of all, that if you have any more descriptors or phrases and little things that you remember Art saying, please do include them on the back posters. We'd love it. I know I can see a lot of people have added things. And then the words to the poem Trees by Steve McDowell and the lyrics to this song are on a paper that you can pick up. I think it's on the back table. In any case, okay. So now this is a message from Martha. The song, Gracias a la Vida.
Violeta Parra era chilena.
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio 2 luceros que cuando los abro, perfecto alto distingo lo negro del blanco y en el alto cielo su fondo estrellado y en las multitudes el hombre que yo amo. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado el sonido, el abecedario, con él las palabras que pienso y declaro, madre, amigo, hermano, y luz alumbrando la ruta del alma del que estoy amando. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la marcha de mis pies cansados, con ellos anduve ciudades y charcos, playas y desiertos, montañas y llanos, y la casa tuya, tu calle y tu patio. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me dio el corazón que agita su marco cuando miro el fruto del cerebro humano, cuando miro el bueno tan lejos del malo, cuando miro el fondo de tus ojos claros. Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, me ha dado la risa y me ha dado el llanto, así yo distingo dicha de quebranto, los dos materiales que forman mi canto y el canto de ustedes, que es el mismo canto, y el canto de todos, que es mi propio canto. Gracias a la vida